Andrew Knight, and welcome to this next episode of the RICS Tech Partner Program. I've been with RICS now for over 10 years, and I sit in the standards, regulatory and thought leadership part of the organisation. And my role is to look at the effects of data and technology right across the built and natural environment, with over 130,000 members working worldwide, right across the property cycle, across rural, agricultural, residential, commercial, infrastructure. There's a huge canvas upon which data and technology is bringing benefits to the sector. And today I'm really glad again to have a conversation with Thomas McAlpine from Addland. So Thomas, do join me again.
Hi Andrew, it's good to be back.
Yeah, welcome again, and good to chat again. And we had a fascinating conversation last time, I know, where we talked about your backstory, particularly in terms of land due diligence. I think you did rather rudely call it the Wild West at some point, but it was certainly, I think, as you mentioned,
I may have mentioned that.
But it was certainly a really interesting backstory you had in terms of your particular skill set. And I know you mentioned the kind of technology skills you have across the team. And I think it's an interesting point to make once again, as I often do in these conversations, the power of combining domain specific knowledge about land and property with that technical know-how, because obviously there are a number of challenges about how you bring together the data sets and present the technology. But I really wanted to start with a question about productivity, because there's ultimately, technology is not here for technology's sake, it's about productivity. And it'd be just really good to hear again your view on how your kind of platform brings productivity gains, because you lived and breathed this issue. You lived and breathed the challenges of bringing together lots of data sets for that kind of due diligence purpose. So please do bring that alive for us, Thomas.
Of course, thanks Andrew. I mentioned in the last session, my background was as a land promoter. I'd be having to do all this due diligence on sites, and a developer has to do the same. A surveyor has to go out and do surveys of sites, and the solutions that were out there just meant that you had to do it really manually. You'd have to go off to Historic England's website and DEFRA's and Natural England, and it could take forever to actually just do what was quite basic due diligence on a piece of land. So Addland, in our mission to build this single destination, on one side it's that marketplace we mentioned last time, on the other side it's the professional tools, which buyers and sellers of land and also land professionals need to be able to do the correct due diligence on land, and bring those all into one place, and in the process making it visible and accessible to all. And that's really where what we tried to do with Addland Professional was get those productivity gains by making it really accessible so that anybody could use it. And accessibility is also it's not just usability, it's also affordability. So Addland is, as a solution, is priced to the point where absolutely anyone can afford it, any business. I mean, we're talking compared to some other options that are out there, of 75% less. And the reason we can do that is because of our marketplace side. We can afford to make the software at a lower price point without actually sacrificing very much of the overall functionality. And affordability is something that's been huge, because there are people out there who have been charging a lot more for these types of products. But luckily, I think for the market, for yourselves and for large businesses, for SMEs, the price point has come down over the last few years as new players have entered the market.
Yeah, I mean, Thomas, that's sorry to interrupt, but that's a key point, and I always sort of slightly remind all our tech partners about this issue, that the fact that so much of the profession, like other professions, whether you're talking about architects or lawyers, the majority of the profession sit in these smaller practices, these SMEs. And I'm sure you and I both have discussed this in the past, that obviously the larger surveying firms often have a lot of this expertise in house. They're able to go to these data sources themselves, but it's also critical for us that our SMEs have this ability to access technology. And you've mentioned the price point, which is a good thing to hear in terms of that. And I guess it's an obvious comment to make, but this is software as a service. So this is something that effectively people can simply log on to. It's priced in an accessible way. And I guess, as we'll see in a few minutes, from a kind of ease of use perspective, yes, you need to be a specialist in terms of land and property, but this is not a tech product in terms of that kind of interface, is it?
No, it's not. It's it's something that when you start using the platform, and you showed sort of a quick demo in the last session, it's very intuitive. The layout's there's no distractions. You can get right to the data you really want very quickly. And it's interesting you mentioned the SMEs. We really did build it with SMEs in mind as well. It's not just for the huge agents and the huge property developers, because as you say, they often have either their own internal technology, some mapping solution. We find with some of the really big agents, they have their own internal mapping, but then they still come to us because they're using our marketplace side to sell land. They still come to us and want to use our tools because, ultimately, we're a tech company and that's what we're good at. And our, team Addland is very fortunate that we've attracted some seriously good talent from across the prop tech and wider technology industry over the last year. But that's what we do. And so we always say to these developers and agents who are using their internal stuff, we won't go and try and sell any land or build any homes, and we'll just keep providing robust and accessible data. So for SMEs, it's brilliant because Addland as a single destination allows them to do everything themselves really easily, and as you say, at that affordable price point. So they can come onto Addland and know that they're getting robust, reliable data. It's updated regularly at the frequency it needs to be, and it's all in a clean, intuitive interface that makes the land visible and accessible.
That's great. I mean, it's probably worth us in a few seconds looking at the platform itself, because another area that I'm interested in, as well as that kind of due diligence, is more the kind of brokerage side in terms of what land agents can do with it as well. So maybe you could show us that kind of, dare I say, use the word brokerage, but that view from that kind of more sort of transactional.
Of course, yeah. We call it the marketplace side. So this was, as we mentioned at the beginning of session one, there were two sides to Addland, and there were two problems we wanted to solve. One was, yes, providing all this data for buyers and for sellers, and also for professionals who may or may not be buying or selling land and just doing it as their day-to-day job, like surveyors. But on the other side, it was trying to give buyers and sellers this really great experience where they could go to one single destination and actually be able to find just land, or as I'll show, we also do houses with land as well.
Yeah.
So let me show the application here. So this is our homepage right now. So you can see the latest picks that have come onto the website in each region. Yeah. You can see the different main categories of land. So agricultural, which is mainly farms, development, rural, which is things like woodlands and equestrian properties, grazing, etc. And then we have our residential homes category as well. We'll go in and we'll look, say, in Oxfordshire, and you'll be able to see, we won't pre-select any land types, we'll just see all of them. Okay. And you'll be able to see all of the properties that we currently have just in Oxfordshire. So you can see all of these icons. It's a split view, and you can see all of the properties currently in Oxfordshire. You can increase that range as well. So you could say add 25 miles, to the radius. And the iconography here, you can quickly spot what's a farm, what's development, what's rural. And one of the key things that we do on Addland is one of our USPs is that we show, as you can see there, the exact property boundary. So whether that be made up of one title or 5 titles grouped together, or part of 2 titles, we show the exact, so the buyer knows exactly what they are buying, and the seller can really easily show that buyer without having to answer a million questions about, can you send me a plan for this and a site map and things. It's already there.
So you'll effectively merge the polygons into one
exactly
boundary.
Exactly. And it's the polygons, that data that we get actually from HM Land Registry, and then we then take that and create our own functionality of how to use them and customize them. That enables all of this to work. And on the other side here, so all of these listings here are represented in the list view over here. So you can see listings from Knight Frank, Stratton Parker. You can load more as well, and you can also filter out. So if you only want to see, say, residential, you want to see country estates, country homes, and you want to see bare land, equestrian, recreational, woodland. So basically all of our rural and residential categories, you save that and you search again, you'll notice all of the red agricultural and the purple development sites will disappear, and you'll be left with these ones, and you can see the list has updated to reflect that. So this is, and of course you go in here, you can click on one of these. This is on with one of our agents, Fisher German, and then you can click on there and you get what we call the listing detail page, where someone can easily book a viewing, get in touch with the agent, find out all the information they need to know about the piece of land And at the end, we also reiterate that that is the property boundary. That's
Yeah.
exactly what's being sold. Because it's not always, especially if you're selling a large farm, it's not always the entire farm. It could just be some part of the farm. It's sold in lots normally. But yeah, this is the marketplace experience.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I mean, it's been interesting, obviously, that you've highlighted an area that often I think can get forgotten in conversations around the whole rural land use and rural land types. And obviously, with emerging issues around biodiversity, phosphates, nitrates, etc., what sort of things do you either support now or you can see coming into the platform to support that kind of those issues around rural land use?
Great question. In the last session, I gave a quick demo of Addland Professional,
Hmm.
and you might have, some eagle-eyed people might have seen that there was some layers that said coming soon. One of those is nitrate vulnerable zones, and the other is environmental stewardship scheme. So in things like nitrates and phosphates are an issue at the moment, and a lot of the land being sold, well, the credits for the nitrate
Hmm.
credits will actually be worth sometimes more than the land itself being sold. And so I think surveyors have to be really aware of whether the land sits in one of these vulnerable zones or not. When it comes to rural land, environmental stewardship schemes as well, whether or not a piece of land is part of a scheme, at what level of the scheme it is, when it's going to expire. So all of that information, these are layers we're going to be bringing in really soon. Another part that's really, when it comes to talking about rural property, that's actually going to massively affect developers next year, is the Environment Bill has just been passed into law as of a couple of weeks ago. And the Environment Bill, along with a host of other features, is aimed at increasing biodiversity. And biodiversity, what they call biodiversity net gain credits, BNG credits for short, are going to become a huge industry in the UK. Because what it effectively says is that if you have a site down, let's say a site here in Oxfordshire, and you are going to be bulldozing some green space and building 100 homes, and you get an environmental surveyor to come along and say, okay, well, the biodiversity was, say, 50 credits before, you're going to take away 40 of those credits. You then, by the end of the development, have to show a 10% gain. So you have to be back up at 55 by the time the development's finished. That means you've got a deficit of 45 credits. And now you can make on-site provision to restore some of that biodiversity,
Yeah.
but odds are you're going to have to look within the local authority to buy credits from somewhere else and offset the impact you've had on biodiversity. And the way that's done is by people who own farms, people who own country estates and large property holdings can set aside some of their land for this buzzword that everyone uses now called for real rewilding, and
Yeah.
they can work with the local authority to introduce a covenant on the land that will say we won't touch it for 10 or 20 or 30
Yeah.
years, and it's therefore worth X amount of credits which they can go off and sell. So we will start seeing, I mean, we are going to be having biodiversity net gain credits on Addland because they're effectively just a type of land listing.
Yeah.
So our land listings are up for sale or up for option or up for promotion. Land listings can also be just for the credits being sold on that piece of land. But that's going to become a huge business for developers. Surveyors will need to know about those and how they work, and what the impact that a development's having as well.
So very much like the current carbon offset market, where there's going to be a huge need for
Yeah,
participants on both sides to be made available of where those offsets exist, and
yeah,
obviously
and it's
additional covenants on land that people will need to see as part of their conditionality when they're looking at future work as well.
yeah. Well, to meet the requirements of the Environment Act, yeah, whether it be rural or for development, whether you're a RICS surveyor working for a rural agent or you're working for a property developer, you will need to know about these.
Mm. No, obviously a huge implication, and once again, a need for data to support all the participants that are going to need to manage that process. Talking about, I suppose, another interesting sort of set of participants here is the whole area of local authorities and local plans. How do you see the potential of the platform to support that? Because clearly there's such an impetus now for these local plans to be developed and executed and to work with the various stakeholders. And clearly a lot of these will have huge demands on local land use.
It comes back to the affordability point. We really want to work with local authorities. There was a white paper written by Ministry of Housing, Community and Local Government, which has since been renamed with the new Secretary of State took over. but last year, around about August, they released a white paper that stated that the public sector is looking to work with the prop tech sector in order to deliver value add gains in and around, especially the planning policy process. Back when I was a promoter, I'd often be looking at 400-page local plan, joint core strategy documents for various local authorities, having to comb through those, looking at 5-year housing land supply documents to understand, what sites have been allocated, where they were in their housing position delivery targets for that period and that local authority. And a lot of that's all still very, very manual. And we would love to work with local authority, and we are parts of various test programs, working with public sector to see how we can bring to bear our technology into the planning policy process. And that could be looking at helping a local authority being able to collect information to produce a SHLA, a strategic housing land availability assessment, to be able to allocate sites, being able to handle the initial consultation process with the public sector, with the public, and then being able to sort of go through a process where at the end you're looking at producing a map of allocated sites.
Well, obviously huge potential there, given the scale. I mean, are there any other, in terms of your kind of medium to longer term roadmap, are there other data sources that you'd like to get your hands on, if I can use that expression?
Yeah, I there's two sides to our data and how we want to develop our data plan. One is bringing in more and more data layers that our users want, where we bring in a big part of what we do, like any technology company, is we constantly are chatting through our customer success function. We're constantly talking to our customers and finding out what are they liking, what are they not liking, what else do they need, and so we are constantly going through an iteration process. And one of the things we're hearing right now is developers are wanting to understand where infrastructure requirements are, so where substations are, where buried power lines are, what's the capacity of the grid in this area. Contaminated land can affect development, so historic contaminated land, current landfills, things like that. People want to understand traffic, whether that be foot or vehicle, when they're thinking about building a new development somewhere. So all of those types of data sets we want to bring in. On the other side is, what can we do that is only data we can provide, because that makes us what we call in the industry sticky. And part of that, which I think I mentioned on the last session, is in and around the side of the platform, our business that you've just seen, the marketplace, for example, the traffic. 500,000 people we've had visit the site in the last 6 months, and that's growing almost exponentially. Every time they come to site, they do searches. We know what they're searching for. It's all anonymized, of course, but we know the number of people searching in this area for this type of land. And when properties are sold, we know how long it was on the market for, we know where it was, we know how much it sold for. So those two different types of data we can actually bring together onto the research side, which I gave a demo of last time. And we can start showing, say, for example, the search data, we can start showing heat maps of where market demand is in the country at the moment, not just as on a macro scale, but down on a micro scale in the last 24 hours even, what have people been searching for? And when it comes to the knowing where a piece of land was sold and what it was sold for, we can also start producing land comparables information as well. So I don't think I did it in the last session, but we take the land registry data and we show it as dots on the map, but generally that's quite focused on urban areas. And there is no one place that you can go and get land prices and land comparables. There is, because there is no place to do that historically. So what we want to do is start to build up a data set that is definitive of Addland, and that's goes back to why it's all one single destination and why we needed to bring both sides together to make Addland work.
Indeed. I mean, have you had any thoughts about linking? You've talked about obviously your sort of almost proprietary value add in terms of that marketplace data, but I've seen systems before looking at sort of development and bringing in some kind of econometrics in terms of employment levels and things like that, because obviously when people are looking at developments, they're also sometimes thinking of the economic health of areas. Have you thought about adding those kind of metrics in as
Yeah,
well?
I think the way that planning is trying to go, and obviously MHCLG had some setbacks earlier this year, and that they had plans to sort of reform the planning process. But I think where it will end up is people are really thinking about the built environment a lot more, spaces and the planning of spaces, and a lot of that, as you say, is also thinking about the sort of the socio-economic benefits that can be brought by new developments. So that sort of data is data that we would love to be able to provide through the platform. The question is always how do we make sure it's reliable and robust?
Yeah.
Because that's where our value add is, and it's our job to find that data, clean it, and bring it onto the site in an easy to use format. So we will be absolutely looking to bring in other data around social data sets, around economic data sets, and environmental data sets that can give more color to people who are either in development world, in the surveying world, in the valuations world, conveyancing world, and the planning world.
Yeah, but as you say, it's key that it's trusted data. It's key that it comes from a a creditable source, and that people have that
Absolutely.
transparency, isn't it? So
Absolutely, and when we're developing out new products, we go through incredible amounts of testing before anything hits the live site, because we need our customers to trust that they can rely on the data that we're providing.
Yeah, no, there's always that danger in the digital world that just because it pops up on the screen, people assume that it's correct. When, as you say, there's a lot of hard work to make sure that you verify it and make sure it's accurate and that it comes from a trusted source. So.
Well, I think we've all been around the internet long enough to know you can't believe everything you see. But hopefully with Addland, when our professionals and even non-professionals, people buying country houses, come on and use the platform, they can trust in the data.
Good. Well, it's been fascinating to talk once again, and I really look forward to catching up next year, particularly with these developments around local plans and that biodiversity piece, which does feel huge in a good way, as in terms of the impact on the environment, but clearly a huge impact on the way people manage and acquire land. So I look forward to chatting again in the near future, Thomas.
Me too, Andrew. Thanks so much for having me.
Pleasure.